I've been ashamed a lot of times about talking of science and speaking about science and knowledge and things that I was passionate about, because people look you in a strange way when you talk about those things, strange things that they maybe don't understand or doesn't understand what's the application for the social world and the society they live in. But I think that that's the main problem about science dissemination, that we don't care about that part, the value of science itself, the beautifulness of science itself. We talk about the social benefits about talking about science. And those social benefits are sometimes a little dull and a problem to take conclusions and to move your career. So maybe we should talk about that going from the beginning, talking about the little kid that I was once and was passionate about dinosaurs, completely obsessed with them. I wanted to know everything. I wanted to know the era they lived in. I wanted to know what they eat. I wanted to know everything, the geographical distribution, every data that I could find in a book. And when I finally read all the things that I had at home and that I could ask my parents to buy me about dinosaurs, I asked them to buy me 2 more books, 2 dictionaries, one of Latin and one of Greek, to translate the names of those dinosaurs, because I knew that there were more data, historical data, that I could extract from the name, from what they thought those animals were when they named them. And that means that I wasn't just obsessed with dinosaurs, I was obsessed with knowledge. And that's a very important part that we will come back later. Because that kid had a bigger problem. I wanted to know, but I didn't just want to know, I wanted to share that knowledge with people. Because as Carl Sagan said, when you're in love, you want to tell everybody. And when you're in love with science, you want to share that knowledge with everybody. But everybody, maybe all that people don't want to hear you talking about a lot of weird stuff, about science, prehistoric reptiles and things like that. So I was alone in that problem. I couldn't share that with anyone. And I was, in a way, incomplete. Until I reached the last year of university, I was studying medicine, and I found science dissemination, something that I was reading all those years, and I have been watching science dissemination documentaries and things like that, but I didn't realize what I was seeing, what was the possibilities for me to communicate that science that I loved. In that year, I started doing science monologues, stand-up comedy, and things like that, and people wanted to hear that. Finally, I could share it, and I started learning from people with more experience than me the tricks of this profession. And they told me that the most important part of science dissemination and of science was the social impact that it could have. The fact that people should be more free about the knowledge, should know what they read in the newspapers, they tell the difference between pseudoscience and science and all those stuff. And that was, in a way, how science impact society, not the science itself, not the value of the science and the knowledge. It was a different way of approaching it. And even though in the first time I accepted that, I thought it was one more way of understanding science dissemination, with time I thought about that little kid that I was and how that didn't come together, that approximation that they were telling about science impact and what that kid was moved by. That kid wanted to know about dinosaurs, wanted to know about etymology, wanted to know about many things, not because it was the end of the road, what he should know. He was enjoying each step. He was doing it like a hobby, more closely to reading a book or watching a TV show or playing a video game than to learning something that he didn't like but thought it would be important for him in the future. So maybe the social impact wasn't what drives people to come closer to science. It wasn't what we should focus about in science dissemination. And at least by my part, that was what I experienced, and I started talking with people and found that they thought that too. So why are we justifying science and science dissemination by that way, talking about the impact. When we can go back to more easy times, the ancient Greek, when they divided the knowledge in 3 main groups. They had a very basic and technological knowledge, that was the poiesis, that was to build things, to build a boat, to polish a stone, things like that. They had a more practical, the praxis knowledge, that was about economics, about ethics, about politics, and was applied to human cities, human societies and human groups, and was dependent from our world and our way of structuring society. And they had one way of knowledge, more theoretical, more abstract, that was completely independent, and was important because of that independency from the real world. It was abstract, it was pure, and they were very honored about that approximation to knowledge, in contrast with other places of the world, other empires, other kingdoms that didn't understand society knowledge that way. So by then, science was understood in other way, independent of social impact. And people understood the beautifulness of science in a more plain way. It was more evident for everyone. Why has it changed? Why today it's difficult to make someone understand that science makes us see a flower in a different way? We just don't see the colors of the flower. We can see patterns in invisible lights like ultraviolet that bees and birds can see. And that is a beautifulness layer that science can tell us about, and that's completely impossible to reach without it. So what has changed? What has made it so difficult to understand that important marvel part of science? Maybe it was the mathematization of science that was very important, was very powerful, but it took apart the people without a very specific knowledge about mathematics and the people who was interested in science. You had to know mathematics to understand that beautifulness. You had to know technicisms to know what that very specialized part of science was learning and was studying. So that was a barrier that has been built through the ages during all the time that we have been understanding and searching for answers. So that barrier is the main problem for science dissemination. We have to jump it. We have to make people understand and love and understand the beautiful part of science without that mathematical and that technical part. And I could compare it maybe to taking a cup of coffee. Taking a cup of coffee is an acquired taste, something that the first time you dislike. It's very bitter, it's not good for you. But when you understand that that taste is just one more, you get used to it, you start finding other notes, other tastes, other aromas that are important for the experience of the coffee. You start loving it by getting used to it. And science is the same. You need people to translate the technical part to make the beautifulness evident for everyone. We could also compare it with music. We can give someone a pentagram, and we can't expect him to be moved by that pentagram, to feel emotions, if he doesn't know how to read it. There are figures, there are rhythms, there are mathematics, things that he doesn't understand. But if we pick a piano or a violin or whatever, and we play that melody, he would understand it in a very different way. We would translate it from the theoretical approach to the more easy and understandable and sensible way. So that's the same that science dissemination sometimes should do. And when we start doing that, when we start understanding that science dissemination should be a way of putting in value the science by itself, the beautiful of science by itself, we will finally find our place in the culture way, in the culture world, with sports and with arts and with museums. Nobody asks you why you like going to museums, why you like going to concerts. You just do. And science is the same when you start to understand it. But to reach that, the first thing we should do is to stop saying that we are sorry. Stop saying that we are sorry for talking about science. Stop saying that we are ashamed for loving something that's complex. That's the first step, and science dissemination should take it.